Vikrant Reddy joins us now. He is the coordinator for Right on Crime, which is a project through the right-leaning Texas Public Policy Foundation. It's good to have you here.
Thank you. It's great to be on.
Let me ask you, in light of Eric Holder's announcement today, wanting to change the nation's criminal justice system and scale back on those harsher penalties. First of all, talk about what's behind your group, Right on Crime, because there's a lot of big names nationally that are behind this. How did this get started?
Right, a lot of big names. Newt Gingrich, Ed Meese, Jeb Bush, Asa Hutchinson. All of these folks have signed on to Right on Crime's Statement of Principles. People can read it at rightoncrime.com. And you ask what's behind it, and what's behind it really is the success of Texas. Texas in 2007 was told that it would have to spend an extra $2 billion on new prison beds because by 2012 another 17,000 would be needed. The LBB said it was absolutely necessary. There was no way to avoid this. But the legislature said, no, we're going to find some way to reduce incarceration, make sure that we don't have to spend those kinds of obscene amounts of money. And they did it. They put together a bill that instead diverted funds towards, diversion programs, rehabilitation, a lot better opportunities for nonviolent offenders. These are far cheaper. And here we are now after 2012. And as you know, over the last 3 years, the legislature has actually authorized the closure of 3 prison facilities. We've got the lowest crime rate we've had in the state since 1968. And we did all of it by spending less money, not more.
When you think in terms of conservative groups and talking about crime, you would think maybe initially there might have been some pushback on this idea, like, hey, let's not scale back on, crime in terms of the punishment. That might be a deterrent. Was there initial pushback? And I guess the results from your standpoint speak for themselves.
Well, I don't know about pushback, but here's what I would say. The greatest enthusiasm, the real energy on this issue comes from those conservatives that are affiliated with the Tea Party movement. In fact, you talk about Attorney General Holder's announcement today. In a lot of ways, he's late to the party. There are already 3 bills in Congress that deal with different aspects of criminal justice reform. One of them comes from Senator Rand Paul. One of them comes from Senator Mike Lee. These are both mandatory minimum reform bills. One on the House side comes from Representative Chaffetz. And these are all, in a sense, sort of Tea Party Republicans. I think that this is the part of the party that got there first.
And which are the crimes? Clarify for us, which crimes are we talking about that they're saying, let's scale back on these harsher penalties? Is it something that someone at home should be concerned that this is somebody who's very violent and could get into trouble if they're, say, released early or aren't sent to prison?
People who work in this field always like to say that prisons are for people we're scared of, not people we're mad at. So I think more or less that's what we're talking about. We're talking about drawing a distinction between violent and nonviolent offenders. A lot of times the nonviolent offenders don't really benefit from prison, and taxpayers and public safety don't necessarily benefit from incarcerating these people either. So we're talking about finding ways to address these nonviolent offenders that involve solutions other than incarceration.
How will this, what Eric Holder is talking about, impact Texas specifically? Because if we've already done this, differentiate for us, because I think a lot of people, including myself, aren't that familiar with how drug laws work in terms of differentiating it from federal level to state level. Are these completely different crimes that are involved from these 2 different levels?
The founders really felt that, by and large, criminal justice matters ought to be handled at the state and local level. There's an exact line to this effect in the Federalist Papers, in fact. But over the years, you've seen the federal government assume more and more authority over criminal justice matters. That's a problem. And you will know a lot of Texans who get caught up in the federal system because of drug crimes that I think would have been thought by the founders to be more appropriately handled at the state and local level. So hopefully what we're seeing here is the beginning of a move by the federal government to kind of step back from all of these things that I don't think they constitutionally have the scope to be handling.
So what do you think will the end result be? I mean, if you can get your crystal ball here and see what the Attorney General is saying on the federal level, what maybe the trickle-down effect will be ultimately, both federally and here in Texas?
Well, I'm very optimistic, but not necessarily because of what Attorney General Holder did, but because of what states like Texas and South Dakota and Ohio, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Louisiana have all done in terms of criminal justice reform in just the last 3, 4, 5 years. It's one thing whenever you see these kinds of reforms in blue states, but when you see them in red states, it's really tough to ignore. It's hard to say that any of this is soft on crime. I mean, as I said, the signatories to the Right on Crime Statement of Principles sort of speak for themselves.
Finally, looking ahead to the next legislative session here in Austin, any other additional changes that you'd like to see done?
Oh, I'd like to see some reform of our state jail system. I'd like to see really a kind of a broad reform of our criminal laws in general. There's so many things that we lock people up for that we consider crimes that are not really appropriately crimes. We've got 11 felonies in the state related to the harvesting of oysters. Things like that need to be cleaned up.
Okay, well, Vikrant Reddy is the coordinator for Right on Crime through the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Thanks very much for being with us. We appreciate it.
I really enjoyed being on.
Okay, and we're back with more right after this.
Keep tuned in with YNN and Capital Tonight by following us on Twitter @TXCapTonight.